The morning after skipping my wedding, my father demanded $8,400. Weeks later, police showed up at my house because of him. What they found ended his game instantly. There were 2 police cruisers parked in front of my house when I got home, which statistically speaking is already a terrible sign. Nobody sees red and blue lights flashing across their lawn and thinks, wow, maybe somebody brought me a cake. No, you immediately assume one of 3 things. Someone died, someone got arrested, or somehow your entire life just exploded while you were buying groceries. I sat in my car for 3 seconds staring through the windshield. 3 whole seconds, long enough to notice the neighbors, because neighbors are nature's most efficient surveillance system. Mrs. Hanley across the street was pretending to water flowers at 8:30 at night in the dark. Sure, Sharon, water those flowers. Investigate harder. I looked toward my driveway. David's truck was parked crooked, not slightly crooked, emergency crooked. Something happened crooked. And standing in my front yard, God, there he was. Eduardo Flores, my father, 61 years old, former principal, professional victim, Olympic gold medalist in making every situation about himself, standing on my lawn like he owned the place, talking to one of the officers, gesturing dramatically, performing, because that's what he always did. Everything was theater, every conversation, every family dinner, every birthday, every argument, every disappointment. The man could turn ordering coffee into a hostage negotiation. Then he saw me, and he smiled. Not a happy smile, not even a confident smile. That specific smile, the one that says I've already told my version of the story, the one that says good luck convincing anyone otherwise, the one that haunted half my childhood. I felt something cold settle into my stomach. Not fear, recognition. Huge difference. Fear is uncertainty. Recognition is realizing the monster under the bed has a driver's license and knows your address. I got out of the car. Officers started walking toward me, calm, professional. Careful! The posture of somebody trying very hard not to step on a landmine. Never a great sign. My father stayed where he was, watching, waiting, probably enjoying himself, which is honestly one of the more insane parts. Imagine being retired and deciding your hobby is psychologically terrorizing your adult daughter. People take up gardening, bird watching, woodworking. My father chose emotional warfare. Officer reached me, introduced himself, then dropped the bomb. My father had accused me of stealing money from him. Wire fraud, unauthorized transfers, potential felony investigation. Felony. Just like that. One word, one accusation, one lie. And suddenly 14 years of military service was standing on a cliff edge. It's amazing how fragile a reputation feels when somebody starts throwing accusations around. You spend years building something. Years. Then one bitter old man with a grudge starts talking, and suddenly you're defending reality itself. I took a breath. The Navy teaches breathing techniques. People think military training is all explosions and action movies. Mostly it's learning how not to lose your mind while idiots create problems. Useful skill. Turns out, very useful. I asked if his body camera was recording. He said yes. Good. Because if my father wanted an audience, I was about to give him one. I opened my banking app, held it up, started scrolling. And while I scrolled, memories started hitting me. Not because I wanted them, because trauma has incredible timing. You know what's funny? Actually not funny. The opposite of funny. The kind of funny that makes you stare at a wall for 20 minutes. I spent my entire childhood trying to make that man proud. Entire childhood. Honor roll. Nothing. Scholarships. Nothing. Military academy. Nothing. Officer training. Nothing. Deployments. Nothing. Promotions. Nothing. The man treated approval like it was a rare mineral he needed to conserve. Meanwhile, Marco, my younger brother, the family prince, the chosen one, the future, the investment, the miracle, the guy who failed upward so consistently it should have been studied by scientists. 3 failed businesses, endless financial disasters, a credit score that probably caused banks physical pain. And yet somehow every family conversation became about supporting Marco, helping Marco, understanding Marco, believing in Marco. I became reliable, which sounds nice until you realize reliable is family. Code for the person we exploit, without feeling guilty. Huge difference. Reliable people get used, then praised for tolerating it. What a scam. Honestly, the greatest scam ever invented. Anyway, I found the transaction, the famous transaction, the horrifying criminal enterprise, the transfer my father claimed I stole from him. I showed it to the officer, May 15th. $1, sent from my account. To my account, his account. $1, memo line included, best of luck. $1, you know, the amount criminal masterminds usually move before collapsing international financial systems. Officer looked at the screen, then looked at me, then looked at my father, then looked back at the screen. I actually watched the moment reality hit him, the exact second, like somebody flipping a light switch. Because here's the thing, lies are strongest before evidence arrives. Evidence is incredibly rude that way. My father's face started changing, slowly, like wet concrete hardening, confidence disappearing, control slipping, performance unraveling. And for the first time all night, I wasn't nervous. I was tired, just unbelievably tired. Because standing there looking at that screen, looking at that dollar, looking at that pathetic accusation, I realized something. This wasn't about money, never had been. People think family wars are about money. They're usually wrong. Money is just the weapon. The actual fight is almost always about power, control, attention, punishment. And my father had just driven 3 hours to punish me because I stopped playing my role, because I stopped paying, because I got married without begging for his approval, because I finally built a life that didn't orbit him. And apparently that was unforgivable. The officer started turning toward him, and suddenly I knew. Absolutely knew. This wasn't the end, not even close. This was just the first crack, the first collapse. The first time my father had pushed too far and run headfirst into something stronger than guilt. Documentation. And oh man, he had no idea how much documentation I had. Not yet. but he was about to find out. And when he did, everything was going to get so much worse. The next morning, I built a file. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, not some healing journey nonsense, involving journals and self-discovery and candles. That smell like eucalyptus regret. An actual file. 3-ring binder, tabs, dates, screenshots, printed emails, certified mail receipts, security reports, the whole thing. Nothing makes you feel older than realizing you've reached the gathering evidence stage of adulthood. As a kid, you think adulthood is freedom. Then you become an adult and discover it's mostly PDFs. I sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee that tasted vaguely like stress and toner ink while David worked across from me. No music, no television, just pages, stacks of pages. Because here's something nobody tells you. When somebody spends decades manipulating people, they leave fingerprints everywhere. Tiny ones. Little patterns. The problem is you don't notice them while you're living inside the pattern. You notice later, when you're sorting through years of receipts, emotionally and literally. I found emails, holiday emails, birthday emails, family updates, all from my father. And every single one had the same weird structure. Paragraph about himself, paragraph about Marco, request. Every time. It was almost impressive, like finding a recurring villain's signature move. September, Marco needs help. November, Marco hit a rough patch. January, Marco's trying something exciting. March, Marco has an opportunity. Always money, always support, always obligation. Never curiosity, never interest. Never Elena, how are you? Never Elena, are you happy? Never Elena, are you okay? It's weird realizing somebody can know your entire life story and still never actually know you. That's a special kind of loneliness. I kept organizing, page after page, year after year, and somewhere around noon, I found something that genuinely made me laugh. Not happy laughter, the dangerous kind. The kind where you stare at a document and start laughing because otherwise you'll launch yourself directly into the sun. 6 years earlier, my promotion ceremony, big deal, huge career milestone, months of preparation. My father had emailed me the morning of. I remembered being excited. I remembered thinking maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time he'd acknowledge it. Maybe this time he'd act like a father, instead of a disappointed shareholder reviewing quarterly earnings. So I opened the email, and there it was. The entire thing, 1 paragraph, congratulations. Then 3 paragraphs about Marco needing startup capital. I actually put my head down on the table, just sat there, forehead against wood, coffee beside me, evidence everywhere, and laughed. Because what else do you do? Cry? Already did that for 20 years. Trying new hobbies now. David walked by, saw me laughing, saw the email, immediately understood. That's another thing about him. He processes information frighteningly fast. Sometimes I think if civilization collapses, he'll survive purely through pattern recognition. He read the email once, shook his head, kept walking. No speech, no analysis, nothing. Because some situations are beyond commentary. If somebody serves you a burnt steak, you complain. If somebody serves you a flaming tire on a plate, you just stare. Different category of problem. Around 2 in the afternoon, my lawyer called. Good news, which is lawyer language for things are still terrible, but less terrible than expected. Apparently, my father had done something incredibly stupid. Now, I realize that sentence lacks specificity, like saying the ocean contains water. But stay with me. 3 days before showing up at my house, he'd been contacting people. Mutual acquaintances, former church members, retired teachers, parents from his principal days, anybody who would listen. And because arrogant people think they're smarter than everyone else, he'd been doing most of it in writing, emails, messages, social media posts, little breadcrumbs of bad decisions, the digital equivalent of committing a robbery while leaving business cards at the scene. My lawyer had copies, multiple copies. Turns out one advantage of spending your life performing morality is eventually people get curious. When the mask slips, who knew? One retired teacher had saved everything. Every message, every accusation, every complaint, and then handed it over. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I wanted to frame that woman. Not literally. That would be weird. But emotionally. Hero. Legend. Icon. Patron saint of receipts. The file got thicker. The case got stronger. And for the first time since the wedding, something unexpected happened. I got angry. Not sad. Not hurt. Not disappointed. Angry. Real anger. Clean anger. The useful kind. People talk about anger like it's always bad. It isn't. Bad anger destroys things. Good anger builds boundaries. Huge difference. I wasn't mourning a father anymore. That process had mostly finished years ago. What I was mourning was the amount of energy I'd wasted trying to earn something that was never available. That's the scam. That's always the scam. Toxic people convince you the prize exists if you just try harder. If you're better, kinder, smarter, more patient, more forgiving, more understanding, one more chance, one more conversation, one more sacrifice. And then one day you realize there is no prize. Never was. Just a treadmill, and you're exhausted because you've been running for decades. That realization hit hard. Hard enough that I left the table, walked outside, sat on the back porch, stared at the yard. The same yard I'd spent months fixing up after buying the house. Fresh grass, garden beds, string lights, normal life stuff. The kind of stuff my younger self never imagined having. Because my younger self was too busy surviving. Funny how survival becomes a habit. Even after the danger leaves. You keep scanning, keep bracing, keep preparing for impact. Part of me still expected another attack, another stunt, another disaster. Like my nervous system had subscribed to a service I couldn't cancel. Thanks for choosing Childhood Plus Premium. Enjoy hypervigilance forever. No refunds. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Then I answered, and immediately wished I hadn't. Because some voices can drag you backward through time. This one dragged me 30 years. My aunt. My father's older sister. Family diplomat. professional peacemaker, the woman who spent 40 years trying to put out fires started by people addicted to gasoline. And she had called because my father was devastated. Devastated. Interesting word. Apparently losing access to somebody feels terrible after you've spent decades taking them for granted. Who could have predicted? Absolutely shocking development. Scientists baffled. More at 11. I listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't argue. Didn't defend myself. Just listened. And somewhere in the middle of her speech, I noticed something. She never mentioned me. Not once. Not my wedding. Not the threats. Not the harassment. Not the police. Not the lies. Only his feelings, his pain, his humiliation, his suffering. And suddenly the entire family system became visible. Crystal clear, like somebody cleaned a dirty window. Everybody had spent years protecting the person causing damage, while expecting the damaged person to absorb it quietly. That's how it worked. That's how it had always worked. Not anymore. When she finally stopped talking, I thanked her. Then I ended the call. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel guilty afterward. Not even a little, which honestly scared me more than anything else. Because guilt had been there so long it felt permanent. Background noise. Static. Then suddenly, nothing. Silence. The good kind. The kind that arrives right before your life changes. And I had a feeling mine was about to. I just didn't realize the next blow wasn't coming from my father. It was coming from Marco. And unlike my father, Marco still had something left to lose. 3 weeks later, Marco called, which was weird. Not suspicious weird, apocalypse weird. Because Marco never called. Marco texted. Marco forwarded links. Marco sent memes at 2 in the morning that somehow looked exactly like his. Financial planning strategy. Calling required effort. Calling meant something was wrong. Or expensive. Usually both. I stared at my phone vibrating on the counter. Part of me wanted to ignore it. The larger part wanted to know what fresh catastrophe had wandered into existence. Curiosity is honestly one of humanity's dumbest survival instincts. It's responsible for like half our problems. Who discovered fire? Curiosity. Who discovered sharks? Curiosity. Who answered Marco's call? Unfortunately, also curiosity. I picked up and immediately knew something had changed. Not because of what he said, because of how he sounded. Smaller. You ever hear somebody after reality punches them directly in the mouth? Like that. The confidence was gone. The entitlement was gone. The permanent assumption that somebody else would fix everything? Gone. Interesting. Very interesting. Turns out accountability is nature's strongest exfoliant. Really clears things up. I listened, mostly because I wanted information. People always think listening is kindness. Sometimes it's reconnaissance. Huge difference. Apparently after his wedding collapsed, things kept unraveling. Not dramatically, slowly. The way structural damage spreads through a building, a crack here, a leak there. Then one day, half the ceiling is in your living room. His former fiancée had left completely. Mutual friends started distancing themselves. Business partners started asking uncomfortable questions. Lenders wanted paperwork, actual paperwork, which for Marco was basically psychological warfare. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, he'd discovered something: the family finances. Now, this is where things got interesting, because apparently Marco had always assumed my father was wealthy. Not rich, but comfortable, secure. Stable. The way children assume parents know what they're doing. A truly adorable belief. Like thinking printers work because they love us. Anyway, my father wasn't secure. Not even close. The money wasn't there. Hadn't been there for years. The retirement accounts were damaged. Savings nearly gone. Loans everywhere. Credit lines stretched thin. And suddenly pieces started clicking together inside my head. Fast. Way too fast. Like dominoes. Every emergency, every request, every crisis, every financial panic. Not random, not isolated. Connected. The entire system had been running on fumes. My father wasn't financing Marco. He was borrowing to finance Marco. Borrowing to maintain the image. Borrowing to preserve the fantasy. Borrowing to keep everybody believing he was still in control. Jesus. The man wasn't managing a family. He was running a Ponzi scheme powered entirely by denial. I sat there staring at the wall, processing. Because honestly, that revelation hurt more than the harassment. Not emotionally, existentially. The whole family mythology suddenly looked ridiculous. All those years, all those sacrifices, all those lectures about responsibility. Meanwhile, Captain Responsibility was juggling debt like a circus performer. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. I almost respected the commitment, not the behavior, the dedication, like watching somebody sprint off a cliff without ever questioning gravity. A terrible plan, but impressive confidence. After the call ended, I started thinking. Dangerous hobby. Thinking. Would not recommend. 5 stars for anxiety, 0 stars for relaxation. Because once the illusion cracked, memories started rearranging themselves. You know how old photos look different after a breakup? Same photo, different information. Suddenly everything changes. That's what happened. Events I hadn't understood finally made sense. The frantic requests, the guilt trips, the emotional pressure, the endless urgency. Not family support, cash flow management. I laughed, actually laughed, out loud, by myself. In my kitchen, like a lunatic, David walked in, saw me laughing alone, didn't even question it anymore. That's marriage. At a certain point, your spouse stops asking. They're just like, yeah, okay. She's talking to ghosts again. Whatever. The next month brought something I never expected. Peace. Actual peace. Not temporary quiet. Not the nervous kind where you're waiting for the next explosion. Real peace. The kind that feels unfamiliar at first, like wearing somebody else's shoes. I kept waiting for another disaster. Nothing happened. No letters. No surprise appearances. No emergencies. No drama. Nothing. Just normal life. And apparently normal life is weird when you've spent years preparing for chaos. I started noticing stupid things. Little things. The sound of birds. Coffee in the morning. The fact that sunsets happen every day whether your family is insane or not. Very inconsiderate of nature, honestly. The universe just keeps going. Meanwhile, you're having a personal crisis in aisle 7 7 of a grocery store because somebody bought the same cereal your mother used to buy. Brains are ridiculous. One Saturday, David convinced me to clean out the garage, which sounds boring because it is boring. Garage cleaning is what happens when adventure dies. But halfway through sorting boxes, I found an old military footlocker. My first one. Beat up, covered in scratches, old stickers peeling off, and inside was a stack of journals, training years, deployment years, promotion years, versions of me I barely remembered. I spent the afternoon reading. Huge mistake. Massive mistake. Like opening a time capsule filled entirely with emotional damage. 22-year-old me, 24-year-old me, 27-year-old me. Every page had the same theme. Prove yourself, prove yourself, prove yourself. God, I wanted to reach through time and shake that woman. Not because she was weak, because she was exhausted. The saddest part, she didn't even know it. She thought exhaustion was normal. She thought constantly earning love was normal. She thought achievement would eventually fix loneliness. That's the trap. Achievement solves achievement problems. It doesn't solve childhood problems. You can become commander of 1,000 people and still carry around a 7-year-old version of yourself asking impossible questions. Fun little surprise adulthood gives you. Congratulations on your success. Unfortunately, your baggage has seniority. Near sunset, I found one final journal, the newest one. Only a few pages written, mostly wedding planning notes, lists, schedules, venue details, guest counts, normal stuff. Then I found an entry dated 2 days before the wedding. One sentence, just one. I hope they come. That was it. No rant, no analysis, no anger, just hope. Simple, honest, brutal. I stared at that sentence for a long time, longer than I want to admit, because there it was. The last version of me that still believed something different might happen. The final little piece, the final thread, the final illusion. And suddenly I realized something. That version of me was gone. Not broken, not destroyed, finished, like a chapter ending. The grief wasn't sitting in my chest anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was acceptance, which sounds beautiful in movies. In real life, it feels weirdly boring. Acceptance is just waking up one day and realizing you're done negotiating with reality. That's all. No dramatic music, no speech, no revelation, just done. I closed the journal, put it back in the box. And for the first time in years, I stopped looking backward. Because a week later, something arrived in the mail that had absolutely nothing to do with my father. And it would end up changing the direction of my entire life. The envelope showed up on a Thursday. Plain, official. Government return address. Which is never exciting. Nobody gets government mail and thinks maybe it's concert tickets. I tossed it on the counter, made coffee, ignored it for 20 minutes, then opened it, and just stared twice. Read it twice, then a third time because apparently my brain had temporarily disconnected from reality. Selection board, advanced command track, Washington assignment, the kind of assignment people spend years chasing, the kind that changes careers, the kind that opens doors. I sat there blinking like somebody had unplugged me, because for months my entire life had felt like cleanup, paperwork, lawyers, evidence, damage control, then suddenly, future, actual future. Weird. I didn't know what to do with that. David came home an hour later, found me still sitting at the kitchen table, letter in one hand, cold coffee in the other, looking completely possessed. He read it, looked at me, then immediately started laughing. Not because it was funny, because sometimes something is so unexpectedly good, your brain skips every normal emotion and goes straight to laughter. We accepted 3 weeks later. The move happened 4 months after that. New city, new house, new command, new routines, new neighbors. Nobody knew Eduardo Flores. Nobody knew Marco. Nobody knew any of it. For the first time in my life, I existed in a place where I wasn't somebody's daughter, just me. Honestly, that took some getting used to. A year passed. Then another. Life got busy. The good kind of busy. Work, travel, training, weekend trips. Normal married people arguments about where to store random kitchen appliances, the truly important stuff. One afternoon, I got a message from Adriana. Short, simple. Dad sold the house. Moving to Arizona. Thought you should know. That was it. No drama, no emergency, no catastrophe. Just information. I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds, then put my phone down. Went back to what I was doing, which happened to be planting tomatoes in the backyard. And that was the moment it hit me. Not the message, my reaction, or lack of one. No anger, no sadness, no panic. Nothing. Just tomatoes. The man who had occupied so much space in my head for so many years had finally become background noise. A fact. A distant location on a map. That's all. That night, David and I sat outside after dinner. Summer air, string lights overhead, the garden looking surprisingly alive considering I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I remember thinking the tomatoes would probably die. They didn't. Annoyingly, they thrived. Every single one. Months later, I was carrying bowls of tomatoes into the kitchen, like I'd personally conquered agriculture. David kept making fun of me for it. Fair. I deserved it. The first harvest sat on the counter while sunlight came through the windows, and for no particular reason, I found myself smiling. Not because everything had worked out perfectly, not because every wound healed, not because some magical ending happened, just because my life finally felt like mine. No audience, no performance, no permission required. Mine. I looked out the window at the yard, at the house, at the future waiting beyond it. Then I grabbed a tomato, took a bite, and immediately realized I'd forgotten to wash it, which honestly felt like the most accurate possible ending to my story. Years of military service, federal security clearances, command responsibility, strategic planning, and there I was, standing in my kitchen, eating dirt. Perfect.